Hello, so I decided to make this video because I've been an ape since January and watching the line every day, watching all the different YouTube channels and all the support that's out there. But I've made some observations that I thought were worth sharing. I made some posts on Reddit in past weeks or months and get some interest, but that's not why I'm doing this. It's just really to share some insight into what I've seen for what that's worth. Anyway, so what I've done here, what you're seeing here, is the year chart from Fidelity and for AMC, and what I see is a pretty straightforward fractal pattern. And I've been studying fractals just out of interest for years and years, but yeah, I wanted to share what I see here and why I think it's so interesting. What I've done is I've created a series of layers here in Photoshop that will show different time frames for this chart, and I think you'll notice some similarities here. So, like I said, this is a year. Obviously we're down here at the end, but we'll zoom in a little bit. So here's 6 months. Looks about the same, which is normal, but if we go down to the 10-day, you'll notice it almost looks exactly like the same pattern. So here I'll switch back. 6 months, 10 days. 6 months, 10 days. So we'll go even deeper here. Okay, so now we're looking at the 10-day chart and the original 1-year chart. So this might be the most direct I can be about how the fractals repeat themselves, and AMC just seems to be following a fractal pattern. It doesn't seem like, at least to me, that any sort of technical analysis makes much of a difference. It doesn't seem like any sort of big announcement or big move in the industry or price action, buying pressure, none of that seems to make much of a difference. So you'll start to notice there's some pretty straightforward similarities here. But one thing you have to understand about fractals is it's just following an equation, just some mathematical equation. So it's not necessarily going to line up exactly, not because it's not the same pattern, but because the variables are just off a little bit, because it's probably somewhat different, but the characteristics are all the same. So let's see. So you can see right here, you have your initial spike. This is back on June 2nd, and then it's it might look like, oh, it's getting off, but no, actually it's not. It's just this point here is this point here. So because the variables, or the numbers that are generated or input into the equation, can vary to some degree, it's going to change the scale, either how high the vertical part of the chart goes or how wide the horizontal part goes. So we can just play around in Photoshop and just change some characteristics, like the scale, and kind of just line it up differently here and there. So now if this point is this point, now you can see here's starting to follow that same curve, and you just kind of see how the general pattern is going to be the same. So using this sort of observation, it's just identifying the general trend of how a price is going to behave. There's no way of knowing exactly how high a price is going to go at any given time or how low, but it's actually pretty easy to say it's going to go up today or down today. It's going to be green day, red day. I wouldn't be posting this if I didn't think it actually worked. So here, let's just hide the 10-day, and let's bring up the 1-day or today's chart. And what I'll do here is just to see how it lines up. Oh, look at that. Here's that same peak. It's just smaller. I mean, and this is literally in yellow. This is the price action from today, overlaid on top of the entire year. So the fractal pattern, it repeats itself at every scale. Whether you zoom in or zoom out, it's there. So you can actually see a trend for how it's going to behave over the year or the day or the hour, you know, whatever it is. So you just got to keep in mind, you know, it's going to vary to some degree, but the trend, the overall characteristic is still going to be there. So let's see here. Again, I'm just going to take the day chart and I'm just going to scale it up a little bit. There we go. That's dumb. So let's just kind of get an idea of what's going on here. All right. So here we go. Now we're starting to see how it's going to be lining up for us. Stretch it out. Alright, well, look at that. Now I'm really starting to see some repetition here. Alright. Okay. So, you know, here at the peak, it's you know, it's pretty well lined up, but you can see how this point here is this point here, but this point here is this point here, and you know, they're not lined up because the scale is not going to be exactly the same at, you know, for all the different corresponding points. However, it's pretty close from my observation, and yeah, once the pattern starts to repeat itself, you know, it's going to be a whole new set of variables that's going to change the overall scale or size of the pattern. So basically, like for a single day, it's not necessarily like this part here could be representing 1 hour, but then the next trend could be, you know, repeating over the next 2 or 3 hours. But I think it's safe to say, I mean, you can pretty clearly see, you know, even down here, going back to, this is the original spike back on January 28th in the green. You know, look at the day trend. You know, I didn't make this up. This is just, it's just there for anybody to see. You know, you got your first big peak, get the smaller little peak, you even have this third peak, and then it's going to, you know, taper off and make a bowl, go back up. And, you know, here's kind of a good example of how the variables make some difference, but not that big of a difference. So you have your main peak here, so it looks small on the year scale, it looks big on the day scale, but really it's the same. You have this peak here, and then you have your you know, your big rise in price. So you know, if we wanted to see kind of like, well, maybe what's going to happen the rest of the day, you know, oh, it looks like it's going to maybe end in the green, I would think. So on the day scale, this looks pretty drastic, but this could just be a matter of sense. You know, you got to keep that in mind. You know, it looks like, wow, you know, we're going to have you know, the MOAS today. No, definitely not. But you know, that said, here let's change this. We'll turn off the day. And let's get rid of these lines here. These aren't doing any good for anybody. Let's see. Okay, now, so let's you know, the 5-day or the 10-day have been like a pretty good representation of how the overall pattern follows the year trend. You know, the 1 day is going to be a lot more volatile. It's going to be a lot more extreme in the changing in the pattern itself, as far as the scaling and all that. But this 10-day representation, we just take this and here in purple, we have our pretty spot on pattern here repeating itself. And again, the scale's slightly skewed and slightly off, but here, you know, if I here, line it up right here. Here's the general peak, the first main peak. But this peak here is this peak here. So, we can kind of just eyeball it and see what's going on. Okay, so after the second peak, it's going to go down. It's a bit of a trough. It looks like it's going to be going up, which is great. So that matches what the daily pattern was showing, and but there's just no telling how extreme or non-extreme it's going to be. But one thing that I've noticed is that it's pretty reliable. If you have this main peak followed by a second major peak, this second peak is never going to be higher than this peak. It might get almost exactly as high, but I've never once seen the pattern actually make this one twice as high or anything like that. It doesn't happen until the whole pattern itself is restarted again. And you can see right here, here's the main peak, just like this peak. Here's that second peak here towards the end. And so, if we were looking at the year and here, based on today, we're basically in this general area, in my opinion, on this yearly pattern repeating itself. And let's see here. So let's just take a look at this kind of independently here. So let's see. So on the year here, so we're right here. There's these two smaller peaks right here, two small peaks right here. So if I had to guess or forecast or try to offer a prediction or anything like that, I would say we can expect a general upward trend throughout the rest of the year. And this could be a relatively exciting day when we get to peak around here, because it looks like it's going to drop off and then spike back up. But what we're hoping to do is we're hoping for that MOAS. So, we want another major spike like this right here. And I believe that's going to happen. I just don't think it's going to matter like what Ryan Cohen does, GameStop does, or AMC, Adam Aaron. I don't think, Gary Gensler, or, the SEC, I don't think any of that, it makes much of a difference at all. I mean, if I want to put on my gorilla tinfoil hat, then to me this looks like the pattern is going to do what the pattern is going to do. I don't know what controls the variables, but if I had to guess, it would just be a random number generator. And I think, again, based on my observations, and having watched Lou and Matt Kors, Andrew Momani, I got to give a bunch of credit to holy shit, trades. Yes, trades. So they've all taught me a lot of things and gave me some really valuable insight into the market and keeping it exciting and what to watch out for. But I've watched all that technical analysis, and it still seems sort of like a grab bag. It's always going to be, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, well, it's either going to go up or down. Well, no shit. And and everybody has their own take and stance on it, and I respect that. And like I said, it's gotten me involved. It's made me money just being a part of this movement, which is awesome. But at the end of the day, no matter what anybody says, it can either go up or down, and that seems to be the trend. Sometimes they're right and they get excited, and sometimes they're wrong and they're all apologizing and everything. Every single channel I've seen, they've eventually gotten so confident that they make a prediction, they get excited, you can just tell, and then a day or two later they're apologizing. So I don't want to make any actual predictions, but again, we're looking at the purple is a 10-day reflection of the AMC price from today. The green line here, or if you want to make it match a legend here, the magenta line here is the year. This is what we've seen over the year. This first spike was January 28th. That's when I got involved. And I've been here ever since. And look at me now. And it's exciting because, I'm extremely confident at this point that we are going to find um, a lot of success by holding this. So, as you can see, not financial advice or anything. I just think we just got to ride this out and see what happens. But it's almost guaranteed to repeat itself, from what I can tell. So, this 10-day chart means, we're right here towards the end. Here in purple here. So let me just turn this, actually I'll leave it on, this magenta line. So what we can see is, I'm trying to do it so let me just scale it down so I can control it better. Alright, so, just remember this, it's easy to forget what we're looking at when we start scaling things around and everything. But, I was just comparing this whole pattern to right here, but watch this, I'm going to compare it down to here now. Oops. Okay, so let's just generalize here. Okay, and I'm going to take it even farther. Here's the pattern. Right about kind of like that. So there's two parts to this pattern. You have your first spike here. Alright, so here we are. First spike, trough, another spike, and again, it doesn't line up exactly until maybe I scale horizontally now, maybe. It's a little bit better. Something like that. Let me just look at this real quick. I think it's actually more like this. Yeah, there we go. So this peak here is this peak here, and you got your two smaller peaks right here. And, this is all a little stretched right here, but you got your first main peak, the descent, the bowl, the two other smaller peaks, and then your second main peak here. And then now we're on this downward trend. So this puts us in this general area again. And so if we're halfway through October right now, around here, so here we are here. Oh no. Okay. So again, this purple line, that just represents 10 days from today, going in the past. And it's following the same pattern here. This is following the same pattern, that was early in the year. It's just on a larger scale. So if we keep this going, we're in for this. This is going to happen. But to me, it looks like it's going to be another couple months at least. And again, I don't think any sort of outside pressure really affects us much at all. Because if it did, you wouldn't see this, in my opinion. You wouldn't see, a mirror image of itself just consistently, and, when there's big announcements I've watched and I've gotten excited in the past, before I started drilling down on these fractals. And, everybody's like, oh yeah, Monday it's going to go up, and then, no, it doesn't. And that's happened, I don't know, week after week after week. It either does, the chart either does the opposite of what people are expecting it to do that on those days, or they get lucky and maybe it does do something, or it just doesn't really do much at all. So it just seems to be, you can't predict it using traditional methods, like what we all expect, like supply and demand, major events around the world, buying pressure. It really doesn't seem, I would watch the price action. I would see like, a $10 million order, hundreds of thousands of shares be bought, and then the price does nothing, and everybody's like, oh, it's ladder attacks, it's the hedgies, forcing this down. I don't think it's that either. I think we're just watching an animated line, follows a simple equation. It varies slightly, but I think there's some rules that keep it in, within the fractal, and that's how fractals work. And here we are. We're just going to keep going. So, here's the dates at the bottom here. Let me zoom in a little bit more. So it's easier to kind of process this and see it all. So, okay, I'm just going to pull these lines across and just kind of line them up here. It's not accurate at all. But let's just say that's about where we're at, mid-October. And let's just say, here's the first of the month, so that'd be November. So, I'm doing this here to match the purple line. Get a rough estimate of, maybe where this is. But again, just keep aware, that scale could be spread out wider or narrower, taller or shorter. But it's going to be pretty consistent with the pattern that it's following. As you can see here, this follows this pattern. And the scale is slightly off, but it's pretty consistent to itself. I think we're just going to ride this out. This line, this green line here, might represent November 1st. And if we were to follow this, I'd say around December 1st, we could see something. But I can't really tell you, because Fidelity doesn't show the dates equidistant from each other on these charts. The closer you get to the present day, the wider they get between each other. So you can see right here, it's, this was the 1st of October. It looks like just somewhere towards the end of the year, I'm expecting to see something. And just from kind of a personal assumption of mine is, all these financial institutions, they don't want this to happen. Somebody does. Somebody, I think, is, there's a puppet master or masters out there that are, somebody wrote this equation. Somebody's making this happen. So it feels sort of deliberate to me at this point. But to me, it feels like they would want to delay it as much as possible because they're making money off of everybody and in this whole process. And then, but inevitably it's going to happen unless something extreme happens. But looking at this, I think this is the perfect time for it to happen. Would be right toward the end of the year. Right before January, maybe in the middle of January, if there is any sort of government involvement in this, they're not going to want to prevent this from happening. They're going to want it to happen, I would imagine, so that all that money, the capital gains money, goes to them. If they wait any longer, then they'll lose that. So the fact that this looks like it's going to take about a whole entire year, just shy of a year, for us to see a MOAS or just another major large spike like this, that just feels super deliberate, and it makes perfect sense to me. Otherwise, they would lose out on so much money. And then I was just looking at some other things, like with crypto and Dogecoin and Shiba Inu, and both of those are following a similar pattern that's even simpler, in my opinion, and just as easy to follow. You just have to take a look at it, zoom out, look at the different groupings of dates. So today, 5 days, 1 month, year. And you'll start to see the same trend. And if you have Photoshop or something, it's fun. Just play around in it like this. And it's pretty amazing. Anyway, like I said, I'm just putting it out there. I know Lou made a video this morning about patterns repeating itself. And that's the first time I've heard him talk about patterns. I don't think he said fractal, but who's the other guy? The YouTuber guy. I'm not the only one talking about fractals. And there's definitely been people talking about fractals in the stock market, before this video, some of these apes, YouTuber apes. But even before them, it's been decades of people recognizing fractals in everything in the stock market as well. So a fractal's going to do what a fractal's going to do, and it's going to be fairly obvious, and it's going to be fairly predictable. This is about as straightforward as I can make it. To summarize, here's the year, in magenta here, this is the year that we've been following for AMC. This is a screenshot directly from Fidelity. And all I did was change the color of the line. I didn't change the scale of the year or anything. And then, we have our 10-day in purple here, and I scaled that down just to show you how we're following, a very obvious trend in my opinion. And, zoom in and you'll see that literally at every level, this same pattern is there, and it repeats. So you have, it's basically broken up into two parts. You got this first part and the second part. You get the first part here, and now we're on the second part here. And so somewhere over here, this is going to happen. Just don't know if it's 2 months, 3 months, or what it is, but I'm pretty confident it's not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be next week, because we're right here, kind of trending up a little bit, but kind of barcoding at the same time on a grand scale. And then all of a sudden we're going to get something going on. We're going to go up. People are going to get excited. It's going to go down, but it's not going to matter, because there you go. At the end of the day, it's just a lot of fun, and I wish you all the best.